It's double air. It's double air. Double air. Double air. Double air. It's double air. It's double air.
You have found the Dumb Christian, and I am here with a guest known as, pause for guests to introduce themselves,
John Mulholland.
John Mulholland. We are actually going to address probably one of the most ignored passages in Scripture, one of the most difficult passages to process and understand, and I'm really excited about what John has to share with us in this part of the Bible. The Bible's about to get very real. We might get a little bit colorful, so buckle up and welcome to Dumb Christian. Okay, John, we have, what is this passage that we're talking about today?
Yeah, it's Jesus has this encounter. His disciples and Jesus have this encounter with this woman, and he basically, she's a Gentile woman. She wants Jesus to heal her child, and he basically says, no, you are a dog, and I am not here to feed dogs. And that is that's a really disorienting. It's a really disorienting text, and it's one of my favorite texts in the Bible, and I love it.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. Before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are you?
Yeah. So I'm John, and I am one of the pastors at Westway Christian Church in Western Nebraska. We are normally, when people think about Nebraska, they probably think of corn. We are the complete opposite side of that. We're about 20 minutes from Wyoming. We are high plains is what it's called. We have about 10% humidity here. It's very hot. It's very dry. We have a lot of elevation, which is one of the things that I love. We have a beautiful bluff, which is why it's called Scotts Bluff. We have a beautiful bluff here in our community, and I've been here. I'm the lead pastor at our church, and I've been here now for a little bit longer than 5 years. My wife and I have been married for 30. These are dangerous questions, like 30-something years, and we have three.
Right.
We have 3 adult children. 2 are married, 1 single, and I've been in ministry since 2005. At Eastview Christian Church, which is where you and I connected many years ago. In doing different ministry things together. So yeah.
Yeah, John let me try and create a college ministry that had like 3 people attending.
Yep.
And he and I were 2 of them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yep.
All right, yeah. So let's dive into this, man. What's going on?
Okay. So here's like this really big picture, and this is one of the things like when we just read the Bible. Like if we were to open up our Bible to Mark chapter 7 and we were to read verses 24 to 30 and just see this story, we would be like, what in the world is going on here? Like if we just read that in isolation, we would just have no context for the story. So what I'm going to do, what I'd like to do is I'd like to read the text, and then one of the things that we do in our church quite a bit is we make sure we set we put the text within a context, like kind of how does it fit, and then that helps us describe it, right? So I'm going to just read the text, and then we'll kind of go back. I read from the New Living Translation. Then Jesus left Galilee and went north to the region of Tyre. He didn't want anyone to know which house he was staying in, but he couldn't keep it a secret. Right away, a woman who had heard about him came and fell at his feet. Her little girl was possessed by an evil spirit, and she begged him to cast out the demon from her daughter. Since she was a Gentile born in Syrian Phoenicia, Jesus told her, "First, I should feed the children, my own family, the Jews. It isn't right," and here's like the drum roll, "it isn't right to take food from the children and throw it to the dogs." She replied, "That's true, Lord, but even the dogs under the table are allowed to eat the scraps from the children's plates." "Good answer," he said. "Now go home, for the demon has left your daughter." And when she arrived home, she found her little girl lying quietly in bed, and the demon was gone. That is a really strange text.
And it's so like weird because, right, like he is going through Israel, Jerusalem, Galilee, and somehow he winds up, I think it's really far north in Syrophoenicia.
Right.
Like, what the hell's he even doing up there?
Right. Okay. So
yeah, there's like all of this.
Yeah. And so we have to kind of go back and like place it like within the text that it's in, which is in Mark 7. So in Mark chapter 7, Mark has just told this story of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law arriving to talk to Jesus, and what they notice is some of Jesus' disciples aren't like washing their hands, aren't following these ritualistic hand washing things that they're supposed to do before they eat.
Okay.
So they confront Jesus about it, and what he basically says is he accuses them of hypocrisy. He quotes Isaiah. This is in Mark chapter 6 or chapter 7 verses 6 and 7. He quotes some Isaiah to them. And he basically says, look, you guys are elevating the traditions of man over the laws of God. Okay? And then he talks to two different people. He calls the crowd together to them, and he says, hey, I really want you to understand something. It's not outer things that defile a person, but it's what's going on inside of you. There's like something inside of you that makes you defiled.
Can we pause for a second?
Yes.
Why do you think it's so important for the religious leaders of that day, the religious elite? Why are they so hung up on the external?
Well, they had a set of laws in the Old Testament. So, 1,000 years, 1,500 years before all of this took place, before what we're reading took place. They had a set of laws that if they didn't follow, God was going to punish them for it. And
there's consequences.
There are. That's great. That's a better word. There are consequences to their lack of adherence to the Jewish law. Well, their lack of adherence to the Jewish law got them invaded twice. Got them invaded first by the Assyrians, and then the Babylonians. And then when they returned from Babylon in particular, like they really went, and if you read through Ezra and Nehemiah, like they really went hardcore at, hey, we got to keep the law, because we didn't keep the law, and now if we don't keep the law now, we have to demonstrate that we've learned our lesson. So there becomes this intense focus on the law, and then kind of as we kind of go through history, like the Greeks invade. And then the Romans invade. So the law and their identity from a religious standpoint is not just a religious identity; it's a national identity. It's who they are. So everything becomes about keeping the law. So if I don't keep the law to the T, then the Romans are already here. What's to prevent them from becoming like the Babylonians and carrying us off to exile?
And it could be even worse because we're already under their thumb.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Wow.
So,
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's this really big move, and these are the different political parties that are existing in Israel. And the big move is you have to keep the law. And Jesus so they come and they notice that some of Jesus' disciples aren't washing their hands. Which is like really basic, like wash your hands before you eat. And it's not about like, this isn't about cleanliness. They're not upset because they don't wash their hands before they eat. They're, like it says in verse 3, the Jews, especially the Pharisees, do not eat until they poured water over their cupped hands as required by their ancient traditions. So that's kind of a cue for us that Mark has given to us, that there's something else going on here. So Jesus then tells the people that are coming to see him, look, you are elevating the traditions of men over God's laws. And then he calls the crowd to him. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, because God's law, even if we read through the Old Testament, God's law isn't just to give us like this pose for us to take.
Right.
But repeatedly he says he wants our hearts.
Yes.
Yeah, even in the Old Testament, that's a repeated theme.
Right.
Yeah.
And they get hung up on actions, outward things, outward obedience. They get hung up on just making sure you wash your hands.
Yeah. So to everyone listening, does that sound familiar to anyone? Anyone like kind of stuck in that routine? Oh man.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So he calls the crowd to them and he says, it's not outer things that defile a person, but it's what's going on inside of your life. I love the way the Message puts it. It says it's not what you swallow that pollutes your life; it's what you vomit up. I think that's so
Sick.
great because he talks about food, and then he calls the disciple. Then he kind of goes off to be with the disciples, and then they ask him. They're kind of like, Jesus, what's going on here? We don't understand what you're talking about. And I love it. This is one of my favorite. This is also one of my favorite. I have a lot of favorite verses of the Bible. This is also one of my favorite verses of the Bible.
Okay.
They say, Jesus, can you explain this? And Jesus' response is awesome. He asks a question. And in the NLT, the question is, don't you understand either? Which is really kind of minor. The NIV says, are you so dull? Which is awesome. The Message says, are you being willfully stupid? Which is even better.
Oh,
and then,
damn,
but the Greek is, are you senseless? So he's like, how can you not understand what's going on? Are you guys so stupid that you can't grasp this? So then he teaches and he talks about food. He says, food doesn't defile you. It doesn't go into your heart, but it passes through your stomach and into the sewer. And then he says, what does defile you? And then in right before the section that we're really talking about, he lists off this group of sins. He says, it is what comes from inside that defiles you. For from within, out of a person's heart, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, wickedness, deceit, lustful desires, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. All these vile things come from within. They're what defile you. So that's like the setting of this, right? So Jesus has just had this, or Mark places this interaction where Jesus has just had this this conversation with the disciples, with the people, and the Pharisees about like inner and outer purity, right? So what makes a person pure? And it's not.
I think that's really
thing.
Yeah, and I think, man, okay, I think I see where you're going, and it's so interesting that for whatever reason, and maybe Christians just haven't done like a really good job of this, but the world typically looks at Christians and say, oh, you just get hung up on the fact that I do this thing.
Sure.
And instead of like that introspective, like, man, is my heart perfect, or do I have something like going on in my heart that I'm at least willing to admit something inside isn't quite perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So then we have the text. So then Jesus leaves Galilee and goes north to the region of Tyre. Right. So that's like, as you said, that's far north. That's like 30 miles. One of the things that I always encourage our church body to do is when it talks about that, like, spend 30 seconds of research and see what that meant. You know, like we think, well, I'm just going to go to the store, and we hop in our car and we drive and we come back and we're there. And this is 30 miles. So this is probably like this probably isn't a day. This is probably a day, day and a half, 2 days worth of journey. And he goes to this place, and he has this encounter with this Gentile, with this woman.
Can you really quick, maybe some of our listeners don't really know what that means, Gentile.
Yeah. So a Jewish person is like a Jewish person by religion and by nationality, and a Gentile would pretty much be anyone else. So someone who is not a Jew is going to be a Gentile. The Romans were Gentiles, because this lady, this woman was not a Jewish person; she was a Gentile.
Okay.
It's really this comes into play in this text because it's really the language of like othering another person, right? So because they're not me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call them, like I'm going to label them a Gentile. This is where it's in this Gentile land, so I'm going to other this other person. I'm going to create this distance between me and this other person.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
So she comes. It's interesting. Jesus doesn't want anyone to know where he is, which I'd like to talk about in a few minutes.
Okay.
Jesus doesn't want anyone to know where he is. She finds him anyway. Obviously, she's heard about him, and she's like, my daughter is sick. She has a demon, possessed by an evil spirit. Can you cast the demon out? And Jesus says, well, I'm here for, essentially, this is the Mulholland paraphrase, I'm here for the Jews, and it is not it's not right for me to take what is for my people, the children, and give it to the dogs. So Jesus then is sort of playing into this. He's playing into into the Jewish cultural norm to talk about people in a certain way.
That tradition.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So you probably you can see where this is heading. And then she, because she what's interesting is she knows her place. She understands, like she knows who the dog is in the story. That's true, Lord, but even the dogs under the table are allowed to eat the scraps from the children's plates. So she knows positionally where her societal status, at least in relation to Judaism, she understands her position in society. She knows that she's the dog.
And not that is her position, but culturally, the way
Correct.
that they interact with. Yeah. Okay.
So he says, "Good answer. Go home. The demons left your daughter." Well, then I want to talk about the next section too. So I want to talk about the next section, and then try and tie all of this together because these things are all related.
Okay.
So then Jesus leaves Tyre, goes to Sidon, before going back to the Sea of Galilee and the region of the 10 towns. So Jesus is kind of returning back into Jewish territory. A deaf man with a speech impediment was brought to him, and the people begged Jesus to lay his hands on the man to heal him. Jesus led him away from the crowd so they could be alone. He put his fingers into the man's ears. Like, this is another weird one. He put his fingers into the man's ears. Spitting on his own fingers, he touched the man's tongue. Looking up to heaven, he sighed and said, "Epaphtha," which means be open. Instantly, the man could hear perfectly, and his tongue was freed. Jesus told the crowd not to tell anyone, but the more he told them not to, the more they did. They were amazed and said again and again, "Everything he does is wonderful. He makes the deaf hear and gives speech to those who can't speak." So, like these three stories, Mark has put these three stories together for a reason. And this, as I've been reflecting on this, because again, I love this story so much. Both the woman and this deaf man, they're both outsiders. The woman is an outsider because she's a Gentile.
Okay.
And the man's physical condition makes him an outsider. So these people, this woman, the Syrophoenician woman and the deaf man, they're both separated because of their external condition. And
which the Pharisees were worried about at the beginning.
Yes.
Okay.
So
I'm with you.
If we flip back to those first 23 verses, that's exactly it. It's external versus internal purity.
Wow.
What makes someone pure? What makes someone worthy of God's grace? What makes someone worthy of God's mercy? The Pharisees and the teachers of the law earlier in chapter 10 would say, or chapter 7, you guys aren't washing your hands, so you're not you are not living a life that's worthy of what's happening. And then there's this woman who is, go ahead.
Has anyone heard that before? Anyone felt like maybe that's the soundtrack you're hearing, or maybe you're even telling yourself. Wow. Okay, keep going.
Okay. Well, then one of the things that we want to make sure we do is we want to look, because this Mark scene isn't the only version of this story. There's a Matthew also lists it in his gospel.
Okay.
But he starts it a little differently. This is Matthew chapter 15, beginning at verse 21. Then Jesus left Galilee, went north to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Gentile woman who lived there came to him, pleading, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David, for my daughter is possessed by a demon that torments her severely." But Jesus gave her no reply, not even a word. Then his disciples urged him to send her away. "Tell her to go away," they said. "She's bothering us with all of her begging." So just let that sit in there for a second. So Mark doesn't include that part, but Matthew does. Well, earlier in chapter 7 in Mark, when Jesus is addressing the Pharisees, and he's talking about the way their traditions go over God's requirements, one of the things that the Pharisees were encouraging people to do was, you don't have to support your parents. As long as you give the money to the temple, you don't have to support your parents, right? So that's an excuse for you to not meet the needs of others. One of the things that's interesting is, as we go through the Gospels, the disciples begin to get really protective of their time with Jesus.
Yes.
In chapter 6 of Mark, they say, "Send the crowds away. There's not enough food to feed all these people." And then in a few chapters, in Mark chapter 10, parents are going to bring their children to see Jesus, and they're going to be like, "Get these kids out of here. Jesus doesn't have time for you." And the question that we have to kind of wrestle with, do we see the similarities? Like, "Mom and Dad, I can't help you because I've given all my money to God." And now the disciples are starting to say, "Send these people away. God, Jesus, you are our thing.
Right.
Don't you belong, kind of like you belong to us. Send this woman away.
Wow.
You're not, Jesus, you're not for..."
We don't want to share.
Yes, none of these people. So really what this comes down to is these people are, whether they're the Pharisees or the disciples, in fact, they are so concerned about not letting the wrong people have
into
access
church
to God. Yes, exactly. They don't want to let the wrong people in. They don't want to let the outsiders in, because that is going to that's going to affect their power, their place, their preferences, their position. All of those kinds of things are going to be
and their comfort level.
Yes.
The way that they have their own rhythms, and I like the way my church works right now, and I like the sermon style and the hymns that we sing, and I like these rhythms.
Right.
I don't want. Oh man. Okay.
Right.
Wow.
So Jesus then, he's not going to let the disciples interrupt his mission and his purpose when they try to keep him for themselves. So they're like, "Hey, Jesus, send all these people away. There's not enough food here." And he's like, "Well, you feed them," right? So he's challenging them to do that. He's not going to let the Pharisees, now in Mark chapter 7, he's not going to let the Pharisees and the teachers of the law interrupt what he's doing when it comes to outsiders. He's not going to let disobedient people interrupt his mission. And it's easy for us, in our advanced 21st century mindset, to read this text where Jesus is talking to this woman and accuse Jesus of being sexist or racist and all of those kinds of things. But what he's really doing is he's using the culturally normative language of their day. And the offensiveness of that, he's using all of that to teach. And I think he is he's deliberately being provocative in the way he does that. And I think
to hold up a mirror.
yes, and I think that's really
To be like, hey, do you guys see what you're doing here?
right. And I think
this is what you're doing.
yeah, and connecting and making sure that we're reading like both versions of this story from Matthew and Mark. It really sheds light on it because you can kind of see like, so she comes in Matthew and she asks and like he won't even look at her, doesn't want to talk to her, and the disciples are like, get this lady out of here. And I just imagine when Jesus, I imagine how inwardly excited the disciples were when Jesus started off with, well, first I should feed the children of my own family. Like you can imagine, like maybe it's just me. Like I can just imagine, like, yep, he's about to put this woman in her place. He's about to tell her to, get the heck out of here.
GTFO, right.
Yeah, get out of here. You don't belong. It isn't right to take food from the children and throw it to the dogs. And they're like, boom. He's one of us. He knows where she belongs. Now she knows where she belongs. And then she knows, again, like she knows her culturally normative place. And then I can't, as much as I imagine the excitement of the disciples when he was, kind of telling her off, I can't imagine the shock that they would have had when he flipped it and healed her.
Right, because they're like, yeah, all right. Wait, what did he just say?
Exactly. And like her response is, I may be a Gentile, I may be a nobody, I may be a dog, but like I will take the bare minimum from you.
Anything you can afford me.
Anything that you can give me, I will take. Using your metaphor, Jesus, I will take the scraps, and I know I know you're here to give me scraps. And one of the things that I like so much about this chapter is like it begins with this story of hand washing, and like Mark tells us, it's a ceremonial thing, which means like the way I would talk about this is, which really means it didn't do anything because it's just ceremonial. Like I'm supposed to I'm just kind of going through the motions to do this thing. And what's so crazy is this chapter that begins with this ceremonial hand washing ends with Jesus putting his own dirty fingers into the ears of this man to open them, and then he wets his own fingers with his own spit and washes his tongue to loosen it. And I think this whole chapter in Mark's gospel is forcing us to ask the question, like, what does it mean to really be clean? Am I clean because I'm outwardly clean, because I've done a work,
because I look like what someone told me I should look like.
Right. Am I dirty because maybe I've done an outward thing wrong? Am I dirty because I'm the wrong race, or am I dirty because I'm deaf and I'm mute and I can't do these things? And I just love it so much because this is such a confrontation of Jesus clearly pointing out that our sin is not caused by like outward things. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't make good decisions or we shouldn't be cautious about what we surround ourselves with or anything like that. But the cleanliness or uncleanliness of a person is not determined by the things that we normally would associate them with, but they're really determined with what's going on in their heart. So Jesus here, I wrote this down on.
Can I just? I got a couple of thoughts real quick.
Yep.
So, as you're like kind of talking and processing, to take a step back when she said, "I'll take the scraps." Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know if this is true and correct. But I think, okay, if she did in fact only receive the scraps, a total healing, casting out demons and healing, if that's just the scraps of what God has to offer us, like, whoa.
Right.
That's amazing. If we can just kind of like put ourselves in a position to see Jesus and what he's trying to do and not get hung up on the culture of the day and those traditions and even the things that we try and like get hung up on today about what we should look like and who's supposed to be doing what and all this stuff and whether or not you belong. Yeah. Right. Okay. All right. Keep going.
Well, I mean, ultimately these last two, portions of Mark 7, the woman and the deaf man, Jesus at the beginning of Mark 7 has had this teaching of what it means to be clean. And now in these last two parts, what he's doing is he's demonstrating what it looks like in his own ministry. So it's kind of like,
what does it look like to be clean?
I would say, from Mark 7, to have an encounter with Jesus. And to be
all right, okay,
to be impact. Well, not only, I mean, there are lots of people that had an encounter with Jesus. I would say to have an encounter with Jesus and to be impacted and affected by it, and allow that, maybe to make a difference in our lives. And that
I don't think you can have I don't think you can have an encounter with Jesus and not walk away affected.
Yeah, and this probably, like, this is the part of this is probably the part of the conversation where if this is probably going to sound awfully churchy, with Christians it always comes back to the same things, right? We're supposed to do this, and it's that tension between has the encounter that I've had with Jesus impacted and affected my life in a way that that I'm going to be different because of it. And we were actually just talking about this last night in our small group. We're going through Romans as a church, and we talked about Romans 4 and talks about how faith was counted, or Abraham was counted righteousness because of his faith, which was demonstrated by his actions. And I think for people who aren't, maybe for people who aren't Christians, this gets really kind of intangible for them.
Right. I think even for some Christians, it's difficult to put our hands on.
Right. Because he's saying it's not external things, and to demonstrate it's not external things, I'm going to heal this Gentile woman's child, and I'm going to stick my fingers in this guy's ears, and that's going to be really weird for people to see. But there is, there has to be an encounter with Jesus, and in some like that demands a response.
Right.
That is going to address the things that are inside of me that defile me. In some way, even if it's a scrap, like you said. I really appreciated the way you talked about that. Like, even if it's the most minor, smallest, most insignificant thing. Like, what can God do in the most, in my mind, insignificant way? And it's not insignificant, but like, if like you said, if the scrap can do that, imagine what it would be like to have the fullness, to be in a relationship where I had the fullness of God available to me.
Wow. Yeah.
And the thing is that is actually, as Christians, that is something that we have access to. And this is for me, next week's sermon, in Romans chapter 5, Paul talks about all these things about righteousness. And I think some people are satisfied with that righteousness. Like, God has made me his, but there's so much more available to us but we have to receive that.
So you're talking about like the difference between just like believing in Jesus and then living a life that's just consumed by him.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I there's one last thing that just is like resonating in my heart so loudly right now. When you were talking about the way Jesus interacted with the Syrophoenician woman and the deaf man, mm-hmm. we kind of established that he's holding up a mirror. Like, hey, look, this is how you guys treat people. This is not how God wants us to be treating people.
Right.
And this is one of the, it wrecks me to the core. It's one of the innumerable things about the cross. When Jesus went to the cross, he's holding up a mirror. He's like, hey, look, this is how you treat a righteous, perfect person. Right. You guys need to be aware of this. Mm-hmm. And he did that by letting them nail him to the cross, right? Like, right. Maybe this doesn't belong in here, but we're going with this. When he's on trial, like the night before he gets crucified, they can't convict him. So he has to like set things in motion. He's like, all right, I'm God. Yeah. Let's just get this over with.
Right. Yeah.
And to hold up that mirror.
Right.
So that we're confronted with the ways that we live, interact with each other, talk to ourselves, believe in God that aren't actually the things that draw us into his goodness and those scraps.
Right. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. And he's willing to, especially for this woman, he's really willing to play into their cultural story to reveal it for what it is, for how shallow it is and how insignificant it is. And I think Tyre and Sidon, doesn't he say something like the people like, and this could be way wrong, and you might want to edit this out of the video, but I feel like somebody says like the people of Tyre and Sidon are going to like sit in judgment over you.
Oh yeah.
So
he says that to his hometown.
Yes,
because they don't believe in him. Says yeah.
So like there's this. I like that. I like that Jesus is unafraid to provoke and to confront, and he's not beyond like using what I would call sarcasm. He's not beyond using offensive things to call out the sin in the lives of people that need to be addressed. And I know for me, like, I know that I need a God who is willing to confront me on my sin.
And he does it so gently. He's so good at how he does it.
Yeah. And so I think, so to go back, like, Jesus in this story, Jesus is utilizing this story to teach to be the living demonstration of his teaching to the Pharisees, the crowd, and the disciples of what it means to be clean and what it means to be dirty, so that he can demonstrate that for them.
Yeah, and I think if we're fair and we're honest, there just might be something there for us too, not just them. But that's Mark 7 and the Syrophoenician Dog Woman. John,
Yep.
Man, thank you. I feel like, all right, let's go.
Cool.
That was great. Thank you so much, man.
Yep, you're welcome. Thanks for letting me be a part of this.
Yeah. Maybe we get to do it again sometime.
Okay, I'd like that.
All right, man.
All right.
Hey, well, we'll catch you later. Thanks, man.
Yep.
Guys, and that was John Mulholland walking us through a really difficult and sensitive passage. I hope that you were able to track with us and follow along with why this is actually a valuable conversation that Jesus has with this woman, a Gentile woman, and what it might actually mean for all of us. Be sure to check out our YouTube, Dumb Christian Podcast. We got exclusive content up there. Subscribe, like, share this with your friends and family. Hit that bell. Here comes the butler. Fish and chips, everyone. I love you guys. Later.